In the Bronze Age of heroes, when gods walked among mortals and monsters lurked in the shadows of the world, there lived a king whose greatest fear was not death in battle, not plague, not famine, but a child. His own grandson, King Acrisius of Argos, had journeyed to the sacred oracle at Delphi, seeking wisdom about his reign, but instead received a prophecy that would haunt him forever. His daughter's son would be his doom, and by that child's hand he would meet his end. Prophecies in the ancient world were not warnings to be heeded, but fates to be endured. Yet Acrisius, in his arrogance, believed himself cleverer than the fates themselves. Returning to his palace, he gazed upon his daughter Danae, beautiful beyond mortal comprehension, kind-hearted, beloved by all who knew her. In that moment, love warred with fear in the king's heart, and fear won. He built for her a prison of bronze, a chamber underground where no man could reach her, where no suitor could court her, where no child could ever be conceived. The princess, who should have been choosing between princes, was instead choosing between madness and resignation in her metal tomb. But Acrisius had forgotten something crucial. If you imprison a princess, eventually someone notices, and sometimes that someone is a god. Zeus, king of the gods and lord of the sky, had been watching, and Zeus had fallen in love. Through the smallest gap in Danae's prison ceiling, he came to her as a shower of golden rain, light itself made tangible, flowing through stone and bronze as easily as water flows through a sieve. In that impossible union between mortal and divine, between prisoner and sky god, a child was conceived, a child of two worlds, human enough to walk among mortals, divine enough to challenge the impossible. His name was Perseus. When Acrisius discovered his daughter nursing a golden-haired infant whose eyes held starlight, his rage shook the very foundations of the palace. The child would indeed be his death, but the king refused to murder his own blood with his own hands. Coward that he was, Acrisius chose a crueler fate. He sealed both mother and child in a wooden chest and cast them into the wine-dark sea, telling himself their deaths would be Poseidon's doing, not his own. For days the chest rode the waves like a cork. Inside, Danae held her infant son close, singing lullabies to drown out the sound of her own terror. She had no food, no fresh water, no hope, only love for the child who might be the last thing she ever held. Her voice grew weaker with each passing day, but still she sang, because in that floating prison, her songs were the only thing standing between her baby and despair. But Perseus was the son of Zeus, and Zeus had not saved them from Acrisius only to let them drown in Poseidon's realm. The chest washed ashore on the island of Seriphus, where a kind fisherman named Dictys found them, half dead, salt-crusted, but miraculously alive. When the fisherman asked how they came to be in a box upon the waves, Danae could only whisper that they were exiles from their homeland and that this was her son, Perseus. Dictys and his wife raised Perseus as their own. The boy grew strong and clever, beloved by all who knew him. But on Seriphus lived another Nan who watched Perseus grow with very different eyes. Polydectes, the king of Seriphus, who wanted Danae for his wife. And with each year that Perseus grew taller and stronger, the more he stood as an obstacle between the king and his desired bride. Years passed, and Perseus grew from child to young man, tall, strong, quick with both blade and wit. When Polydectes announced his wedding feast and demanded gifts from all the young men of the island, he found himself trapped. He had no wealth, no treasures to offer. In a room full of gifts, gold, silver, fine horses, rare jewels, he would be revealed as nothing but a fisherman's foster son. The king's taunts about Perseus's humble origins and unknown parentage struck deep, and Perseus's pride, that fatal flaw of heroes, flared hot in his chest. In one reckless moment, he declared he would bring Polydectes the head of Medusa herself as a wedding gift. The throne room fell silent. Medusa, most terrible of the three Gorgon sisters, a monster so hideous that one look at her face turned living flesh to stone. Her hair was a nest of writhing serpents, her eyes burned with hatred for all living things, and her bronze claws could shred a man like parchment. No hero had ever faced Medusa and lived. Not one. Polydectes accepted the offer with barely contained glee, knowing he was sending the young man to certain death. As Perseus left the palace, his heart sank like a stone. In one moment of pride, he had sentenced himself to death and doomed his mother to marriage with a tyrant. But unbeknownst to Perseus, his rash boast had been heard by more than mortal ears. In the marble halls of Olympus, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, had heard every word. She turned to her half-brother, Hermes, messenger of the gods, discussing the foolish boy's impossible promise. Most of Zeus's children died young and dramatically. It was practically a family tradition. But as Athena watched Perseus pace the shores of Seriphus like a caged lion, she saw something different in this one. He didn't weep or beg the gods for rescue. Even in despair, his mind was working, planning, thinking of solutions. Perseus had never asked the gods for anything, never built altars or offered sacrifices demanding favor. But when the time came to protect his mother, he stood ready to face the impossible. Athena found herself liking this mortal who had earned nothing, yet was willing to risk everything. That night, as Perseus sat by the shore contemplating his seeming certain death, two figures approached through the mist. One shone with silver light of wisdom. The other seemed to dance between steps as though the very air carried him forward. Perseus leaped to his feet, recognizing divinity when he saw it, and fell to one knee before Athena and Hermes. The goddess of wisdom smiled at his courtesy. Heroes, she explained, deserved a fighting chance. From her robes, she drew forth a shield, not of bronze or iron, but polished to mirror brightness. Perseus must never look directly at Medusa, she warned. He must use the shield as a mirror, seeing only her reflection, or join the garden of stone statues that surrounded the Gorgon's lair. Hermes stepped forward, offering his winged sandals that shimmered with their own light. These would carry Perseus swift as thought to the edge of the world where the Gorgons dwelled. But Perseus frowned, his strategic mind already working. A shield and sandals were generous gifts, but how could he kill what he could not look upon? How could he cut through serpent hair with mortal bronze? Athena's smile widened. Wisdom asked the right questions. Perseus needed 3 more gifts. The Sword of Adamant, forged in the heart of a dying star, would cut through anything in creation. The Helm of Hades, worn by the Lord of the Dead himself, rendered its wearer invisible to mortal and immortal eyes. And the Cabesus, a bag woven from the winds themselves, whatever he placed within, could not be seen, could not escape from, could not work its power on the world. But those treasures belonged to others. Perseus would have to earn them from the Grey sisters, who shared 1 eye and 1 tooth between them, learning from them the location of the nymphs who guarded these ancient treasures. At the very edge of the world, where day meets night and the boundaries between life and death grow thin, lived the Grey, the Grey sisters. Born ancient, they had shared 1 eye and 1 tooth between them for countless millennia. Perseus landed softly in their desolate realm on his winged sandals, touching down on ground that had never known warmth or growth. The 3 hags sat in a circle, gray as stone, with hair like cobwebs, passing between them their single precious eye. They sensed something young in their realm, a rarity that made them suspicious and hungry. Perseus crept closer, his heart hammering, watching their routine with the patience of a hunter. Eye passes from sister to sister, with brief moments of total blindness between each transfer. When the moment came, Perseus moved like lightning. As the eye passed between gnarled fingers, his hand shot out and snatched it from the air. The sisters' screams of fury and panic echoed across their wasteland as they demanded the return of their sight. But Perseus held firm, explaining that he took no joy in this theft, but his mother's life hung in the balance. The Ancient Ones whispered among themselves, and finally, grudgingly, revealed what he sought. The Garden of the Hesperides, they told him, where golden apples grew and the dragon-laden never slept. The nymphs there possessed the treasures he needed, though they would never give them to an ordinary mortal. Only if he proved himself worthy would they consider his request.
Perseus gently returned their eye, his courtesy surprising them. Most heroes would have simply taken what they wanted and fled. As he prepared to leave, one sister offered a final, cryptic warning. When he faced Medusa, he should remember that she had not always been a monster. Once she had been beautiful, and her transformation was itself a tragedy. The Garden of the Hesperides existed at the very end of creation, where Atlas held up the sky itself. Here grew the golden apples of immortality, tended by the Nymphs, daughters of evening, beautiful beyond mortal comprehension. As Perseus descended on his winged sandals, he gasped at the wonder before him. Trees bore fruit of living gold, flowers sang in colors that had no names, and fountains flowed upward toward the stars. The nymphs knew his divine heritage the moment he arrived. Zeus's lightning ran in his blood like perfume. They acknowledged his quest, but questioned why they should aid him. Perseus knelt before them, remembering his mother's lessons in courtesy, explaining that he sought their treasures not because he deserved them, but because someone innocent needed protection. Many heroes had made such claims, they replied. If he truly wished their aid, he must prove his worth through trial. They directed his attention to Ladon, the great dragon who guarded their golden apples. For 1,000 years the beast had never slept, never rested. If Perseus could sing the eternal guardian to slumber without blade or violence, they would grant his request. Perseus turned to see the dragon, massive beyond imagining, scales like burnished copper, eyes like burning coals wrapped around the tree of golden apples. Those eyes had never closed, not once in a millennium. But Perseus remembered something precious. His mother, in their darkest hours in the chest upon the waves, had sung to him. Not with trained voice or perfect melody, but with love. He began to sing softly, not a hero's battle song, but a lullaby, a mother's song to her frightened child. The dragon's great head turned toward him, suspicious at first, but Perseus kept singing with all the love and gentleness his mother had shown him. Slowly, incredibly, those burning eyes began to droop. The great head lowered, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Ladon slept. Amazed by his compassion, the nymphs brought forth 3 treasures that gleamed with divine power. The Sword of Adamant, forged in the heart of a dying star, would cut through anything in creation. The Helm of Hades, worn by the Lord of the Dead himself, rendered its wearer invisible to mortal and immortal eyes alike. And the Cabesus, a bag woven from the winds themselves. Whatever he placed within could not be seen, could not escape, could not work its power on the world. Perseus accepted each gift with reverence, feeling their power thrum through his very bones. The nymphs reminded him to use these gifts wisely and with compassion. When he faced Medusa, they warned, he would face not just a monster, but a victim of divine punishment. She had once been Medusa the Beautiful, priestess of Athena, before her transformation into a gorgon. That tale, they said, was one for another time, but Perseus should remember it when the moment of truth came. As dawn broke over the edge of the world, Perseus stood transformed. No longer just a fisherman's foster son. He was now a hero armed with divine gifts and burning purpose. But his greatest trials still lay ahead, in a place where no sunlight had ever fallen, where death waited with serpent hair and eyes that turned men to stone. The Gorgon's island lay ahead, and Medusa was waiting.